They're easy. Yeah.
Well, we've done it super easy.
She wasn't interested at the time, but I kind of found her like, I had a space for her. But Dakota County, yeah.
But you're.
Absolutely, what's up?
Don't slow it down, though. She's kind of a heated thing. You can't just let her go.
We have. You have. Yeah. Maybe I haven't. I know, and last couple. Well, I know, and I need to get one too, so I kind of wanted to see what everybody was
Josh just told me this
doing.
dot thing where you just.
So you guys don't, they don't really care how you.
I met a.
So he said, he's like, I have an opportunity, which is just, I have work. I have a really big job for you.
You can all do that.
Yeah.
If you set your command profile, it has a QR code in it, and all you have to do is go.
Very, very.
Oh, and then you can connect on LinkedIn, some of them have.
We're getting there,
It's,
okay?
it's literally like if you scan it, it'll input everyone's info into their phone, into their. It's really.
Jeez, like.
There, we have it, it's just utilizing.
It is, and then, yeah, and then every time you try it, it doesn't work.
I know, then it'll just.
And you start cursing.
Yes.
I'm not like that, but I. And I like, I can't keep billing my kids. Yeah. Okay, I prepay it.
But anyway, so we got.
I will call you, do you want to, let's start this for October? Yeah, let's talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great. Cause I actually already reached out to this gal, and we're gonna talk to you about, actually about having, doing something in October, just unrelated, but more like just having. Parties at night at her space. And, for anybody who wanted wigs, but just, she would be. Totally up. And she's like. Yeah, because we can actually talk about something.
I didn't know that, so.
Our business. We can have them talk to these gals, do a little stand up on the girls with women in business. There's opportunity here. Rebecca does a women's group as well. Hers is out in Wisconsin, but she. Well, that's not true. I think she has one who is wanting to do one out in, Edina, so. So that's why I'm like.
Set up, I would love to set something up for you, let me.
And maybe we should all do this together.
We could.
Oh, yeah, because
well,
one
and
sense
I'll
doing.
You know what?
Why not just
Or the
collaborate together?
Yeah.
Conference
That's
only
what I
goes.
heard from Jared, is that
Oh,
you-
yes.
You're welcome. Oh, thank you. I look forward to connecting.
Okay. Yes, nice to meet you too.
I can hear you.
How are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Well, yourself?
Yes, thanks for coming with me.
I heard
We
about
used to
that.
have tables,
But we took them out because we thought.
yeah, that's what it's. But I had an idea, like, what's going on? So we usually do that Thursday.
He never, he said he was gonna order the MRI, he didn't, that works for you. So I just go back to order different guy. The next guy goes. Anything. And the
I don't even.
He goes, it's either meniscus or ACL or something.
Okay.
What,
Thursday at what time?
Yeah, Thursday I could do anytime, like after, maybe until like after 2:30.
Yeah.
I'll be there at lunch.
And then it's 12.
Yeah, I could do this Thursday or Monday.
Let's do this. Let's do this or how about three? Yes. Do you want to come in here? So let's do like 3 o'clock.
Oh, flexibility. It's like. Andy, I work out 2 3 times a day. Out 2 3 hours a day. So people that don't work out, they don't care.
Yay.
I'm excited.
I'm excited for it as well.
Thank you.
Yay, good stuff. All right, I'm going to meet with Correct. Are we doing today? Okay, perfect. Yep, I'm still good. I have been. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm meeting so many. ladies.
No,
I'm
that's
just gonna
good.
start calling everybody.
Good.
I have a pretty good shot.
My friend Becky.
That's
Hi.
nice to meet you.
What's your name?
Okay, so twenty. Woodbury. Probably going for that.
I know you like that.
Okay. Yeah. let's get it.
I don't know, it's not like I've been there, but
Yeah.
I was like, what is So we do a training once a month after the team meeting, second team meeting in a month. And just focus on building our wealth. Using our real estate business to funnel our growth and our wealth and thinking like a millionaire, multi-millionaire real estate agent. So we always have a different training every month. So this is the training. So we're actually gonna watch a recording from Jake Amazon. We spoke to Google. It was, I'm speaking to a bunch of executives from Google about how to become wealthy, and like the difference between multi-millionaires, real estate investors versus the rest of the world. And so it's like speaking to executives at Google, and it's so good. I'm like, we need to watch this.
Oh, yeah.
And then share as a group, like our aha. So
Okay.
that's what we're gonna.
Are you like the wealth, the leader? Or how does this work? I'm new to all this, so.
There's 7 of us that are on the board.
Okay.
It's kind of like a little mini like community. They're always like bringing wealth topics to the office.
Okay.
For agents.
Awesome.
Because the reason why we sell real estate is so we can buy real estate.
Yeah.
That's really the reason why. Yeah, and then create our own passive income.
Exactly. Yes, and to just people, yeah.
What's that?
Hi, Tom.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Pretty good. You know, I heard yesterday on the news that how are you, Lisa?
Good.
That we lose 3 minutes a day in daylight, which, you know, if you think about it, well, if you don't think about it, it's like, that's not that big of a deal. But that's an hour and a half in a month.
It is. That's a good point. In a month.
Yeah, it's 30 minutes every 10 days. An hour in 60 days, an hour and a half.
Yeah. It feels like, yeah, it's like every day it's like getting darker early and earlier, which makes sense because it literally is 3 minutes.
We're losing an hour and a half every month.
All right, we're gonna get started. I'm just gonna yell at everybody.
Your mom voice. What happened to the tables? 1 o'clock, starting. I kind of like it. You can get some freedom to move around.
I like that. I need a chair note, so, yeah. I need a table. So.
This is kind of my last one. And I was under the misunderstanding because I.
There are
thought that-
several people that are
I
under
thought
that
that
misunderstanding.
Was our investment in, and I'm like, I think I hate that. And then when I saw others that was, you know, maybe a little less, I'm like, well, why don't I wish that? Like, so, yeah, I was not on the right.
Yeah, good. Well, that.
Right.
Well,
And
table
I
cloth, please.
will say, so at the beginning.
That'd be easier to eat.
and I think that-
The front row.
Oh, great.
Yep.
London, and how much does it actually?
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
All right, we're gonna get started because it is 1:02 and we have an amazing training set up for today. So for those that don't know me, my name is Elisa Sorbe and I am part of the Select Wealth community. Select Wealth is a group that we started in this market center about 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago. And our goal is to bring a training a month to our market center, focused on building our own personal wealth. And the reason why this is so important is because we firmly believe one of the reasons why we sell real estate is so that we can
Buy real estate.
buy real estate, right? So we don't always have to sell real estate, right? So like we have one of the greatest opportunities with with our industry to create wealth, like real wealth, like generational wealth. Because wealth is created by either one owning a business or owning real estate. We have both of those. We're so fortunate. So, so what we're gonna do is we have a sponsor here today. So we're gonna give him a couple minutes, Tom here, to share a little bit about who he is and Keller Home Loans. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch a video. And this video is phenomenal. In fact, I think it's probably one of the best recordings I've seen from Jay Papasan, who is one of the authors of The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. If you guys haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. And he is talking to a group of people at Google executives, and he's talking to them about the difference between people that become millionaires and the way that they think and the habits they build versus everybody else who is struggling living paycheck to paycheck. So make sure that you have a pen and paper because you're gonna want to take some really good notes because he gives some really good information. And then at the very end of it, we're just gonna each take a turn and share what was one of your greatest ahas. What did you learn from this watching and hearing him speak? He is phenomenal. We're super grateful that we are able to do this. This video that you are going to be watching is also on YouTube. So if you have a child, a parent, a friend, and you're like, they need to watch this, you can easily send it to them. So we will have Tom come on up here. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. Tom is on lunch here today, and he's going to share with us a little bit about who he is and Keller Home Loans and how you can help us buy real estate and build our wealth.
Sure. Thank you. So I've been with Keller Home Loans for about 2 months now. Previous to that, we were at New American Funding, Tom Reichenbach and I. We've been working with this crew of people here for 6 years, I believe, a long time. And we've been helping with your clients to get them home loans. And Tom and I both have quite a bit of experience and have been in the business for a long time. As it pertains to investment properties, we're also available to discuss different types of financing that you might need. I have some experience with contract for deed financing. I can help. I can refer attorneys. I can help with a lot of different ways of going about it. Sometimes people take equity out of their house and they either do a cash out refi or they are getting a home equity line of credit. I can refer a lot of banks and commercial investors if it's an apartment building, whatever it might be. So the bottom line is always reach out to me, even if it's not just your standard conventional loan for an investment property. Happy to talk to your clients and help them out in any way that we can. So, yep. So that's all I have. Hopefully you guys enjoy the day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so like I said, with that, we're gonna watch this recording. Make sure you have your pen and paper ready. The recording is about 57 minutes, but it will go fast. It is really, really good. And then make sure you're ready to share your aha at the very end. All right? Thank you, Hannah.
My name is Jordan Thibodeau, and I'm lucky to have Jay Papasan joining us. He wrote The One Thing and The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. In his career, he has sold about 2 million copies of real estate related books. And he also is the VP of Communications for Keller Williams Realty. So without further ado, I'd like to give a hand to Jay and thank him for coming through here at Google.
Thanks, Jordan. All right, I'm super excited to share a couple. I've gotten to work on 12 books since I partnered with Gary, and The Millionaire Real Estate Investor and The One Thing are absolutely the two books that my wife and I immediately said, we're going to start living this, and it's been transformative for us. And so I'll share pieces of that journey in this, and hopefully in an instructive way, not necessarily so that it's not do what we did, but can we get to the truth of the path? Is there a path that's the most proven for people to get what they want? And so I'm going to use the framework of The One Thing. I've spent the last 8 years focused on that book, 5 years of research and writing, and then about 3.5 years since it's been out teaching and coaching to that book. But that framework, when we set it out, we believe it's an approach that you can take to anything that you want to go and do at a really high level. And so it's kind of fun to look at the Millionaire Real Estate Investor and the steps to becoming a real estate investor and wealth building through that lens. And so you'll hear a little bit of both today, and that's the goal. But since we're at the end of the lunch hour, which biologically is a low point in energy for most people, I'm going to actually start off with a little bit of a brain teaser for y'all. And so this is from Charlie Munger's Mental Models. If y'all are familiar with Charlie Munger, he's Warren Buffett's partner. And I read, I think it was an essay called The Psychology of Poor Decision Making, or something along those lines, where he referred to these 90 mental models that he had acquired. And they're all the disciplines, but he saw that they all related to investing. And so one of the themes today is about our decision making and how that influences our action. So I just wanted to start with this because I think it's kind of fun. We're getting to the end of the year. You might be getting bonuses, and this actually will inform kind of your decision making about whether you'll invest that money or not. So you see the problem up there. You go into a casino with 100, you get up to 500, you keep playing, and you walk out with 200. How much did you win or lose? And I'm not going to make anybody volunteer their answer, but 90% of the time, people say, well, you made $100. I walked in with 100, I walked out with 200, I made $100. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger would say you lost 300. And the theme here is called mental accounting. And it's the way in which we acquire money informs our responsibility with it. If you ever follow people who win the lottery, how rich are they 15 years after the fact? And so when people are playing with house money, right, in a casino, it's easy come, easy go. But if you change those numbers and made them thousands of dollars and you were working, you walked in and you started off with $1,000 and you worked for a day and you got up to 5,000, but you only walked out with 2,000, you would not be happy about the 3,000 that didn't leave in your pocket. So how we make money informs how responsible we are with it. And in the game of investing, I've done a few flips, and those tend to be moments where you come into a large quantity of cash relative to what you started with. And how we choose to use that is absolutely going to be affected this. So part of this journey of wealth building, and it's a lot of things to track, and I'm going to give you some framework on it, is to become financially smart. And when you're financially smart, I think there's another step. You have to become financially wise. Because it's one thing to know what you should do and intellectually understand it, and it's another to do it. And so I'll give you a few of these principles throughout where we kind of sometimes misjudge how we should be thinking about things, especially in regards to money and goal setting, and how that can impact your ultimate portfolio. So just wanted to use that as a way to engage your minds a little bit right here at the beginning. So let me make sure that we may have to move forward manually. So here's the 3 books I pulled from this presentation. The first one is The One Thing in the Center, and that again is the framework. The one on your left is The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. We wrote that book and published it back in 2005. And for that book, we interviewed 120 people who were net worth millionaires through their real estate investing. And our goal, as it is with all of our books, is not what Gary or Jay thinks. It's if you look at a large group of people who are seeing a lot of success, what do they have in common? And that's the approach we had. And that was life-changing for me because I saw people who were immigrants, who started with nothing, people who started with a lot, and there was a common path through all of them. And though that book is a little bit dated, I would tell you the first 120 pages was kind of Gary's kind of letter to his son about how to think about money. And that's very, very timeless stuff. And most of the material from that book in the slideshow today is going to be from that section of the book. It's very timeless stuff about how to think about money so that you can make better decisions with it. And Hold is one that we published in 2012 with 4 of the people we interviewed from the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, who collectively have acquired hundreds of residential real estate properties. They own lots of commercial, and they even own property management companies. And that's a much more on-the-ground, tactical, how do I find them, how do I acquire them? It's less about the philosophy and more about the activity. So all of those are things that you could follow up with if you choose to. See if I can get this, I'll go manually. All right, so the theme of the the theme of The One Thing is dominoes. And we chose that because when someone sees the title of The One Thing, one of the first things they will tell us is, it's never just one thing. Like, who gets to do one thing? Nobody. But the idea of the one thing isn't that you don't have other stuff to do, it's that you have a clear priority. And if you align your priorities over time, you can get huge momentum and leverage in your actions. And so the metaphor for us was a line of dominoes. Has everybody here at some point in your life lined up dominoes, right? You line them up just so, and what happens when you knock over the first one? They all fall down, right? That's what we call aligning your dominoes, and that's a metaphor for lining up your priorities. So in researching that book, our researchers found that the world record at that time, in 2009 in the Netherlands, a group actually lined up almost 4.5 million dominoes. And by knocking over one, they got them all to fall down. And so aligned properly, it kind of boggles the mind how much you can get done through one action. And then we stumbled on another piece, and this is the part that I actually think was the coolest. As cool as 4.5 million is, you can find that, I believe it's on YouTube, and it takes about 13 minutes for all the dominoes to fall down. There's a guy named Loren Whitehead, and in the American Journal of Physics, back in 1983 or 84, he wrote an article where he described that a 2-inch domino could knock over a 3-inch domino, and a 3-inch domino could knock over a 4.5-inch domino. And my math breaks down there because I'm an English French major. But you get where it's going. And he built them out of wood. And by the 10th domino, that 2-inch domino actually knocked over a domino that's about 2 inches taller than I am. It was 6'4". And so there is tremendous momentum when you align things as well. So not only can one thing do a lot of stuff, it can actually do more in terms of scale. And so we philosophically thought, well, we can't build them, but if you could actually take that principle out and you start, and I keep this with me, it's a 2-inch domino for me to remember the scale of this conversation. If you start with a little 2-inch domino and you start progressing at that same rate, if you could build them, by the 18th domino, it would knock over one almost as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa. By the 23rd, it would knock over one that was as tall as the Eiffel Tower. And I'm going to pause there. We think of the Eiffel Tower, and I often think of the earrings you get when you're in Paris, you know, like you see the necklaces and the little baubles, right? It's hard to tell how tall that is because there's no context. There's no skyscrapers around it. So the Eiffel Tower, if you go to the tallest building here in San Francisco, right, the Transamerica building, it's actually 250 feet taller than that. So it's actually already 23 dominoes into it, you're already at a huge scale. By 31, it would knock over a domino 3,000 feet taller than Everest. And by 57, if you could build it, it would be a domino that would reach almost all the way from the Earth to the moon. Now, cool, fun, this is the part of the book that my kids read and remembered, right? Because they thought it was, wow, that kind of blows your mind. But the point here is what begins with one small thing, a 2-inch domino in this case, done correctly with the right priorities over time will grow so big it will boggle your mind. And researchers, this is called a geometric progression, right? Anything that grows at a regular pace over time is going to look like that over time. And it's a hockey stick, right? Is what they call it, the hockey stick graph. We believe, after all the research we put into the one thing, is that when you build positive habits into anything, your diet, or in this case, financial habits, your results will look like that. You know, Einstein, the old quote that's attributed to him, you know, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Those who understand it will earn it, and those who don't will pay it, right? Well, if you do anything on compounding, eventually it's going to look like this as well. So I'll give you an example of a financial habit, and that's going to be the thing I want you to walk out of this talk with, is at least one powerful new financial habit that's tied to your personal financial goals. But this is what it looks like, right, if it's successful. Hey, I'm just going to live on less than I earn and invest the rest. I'm just going to do the simple thing, live on less than I earn and invest the rest. And just keep doing that and keep doing that. Eventually, those investments, even though they were small in the beginning, compound, 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 boom. Let's flip it over. I'm just going to spend a little bit more than I earn. I'm just going to spend a little bit more than I earn. Oh, you know what? I'm going to get a second credit card. I can still pay the minimums, but I'm going to keep this pattern up. And a lot of people in our society today do exactly that. Well, that hockey stick will flip the opposite way. And the most common reason for that is someone gets sick or loses their job. And now you're looking at bankruptcy. And so positive and negative habits actually define us. And so becoming aware of them and being purposeful about building them becomes one of the most powerful things that you can do. And I will tell you, if you are willing to work for your habits, what's beautiful about it is very quickly they will start working for you. Building the habit, the investor habit, which is kind of the main thing I would love for you to walk out of here doing, it's something that's absolutely propelled my wife and I's journey, and it can you too. So taking that, the big takeaway is success is sequential, not simultaneous. If you looked at what my wife and I are doing in our business world right now, like if my younger self would, right? We go back like 12 years on this journey, I would be overwhelmed. There's too much going on. Well, it's just like a kid, right? The first time they ride a bike, it's terrifying. But now all of us, after we acquire those skills, right, it's just not that big of a deal. On the journey, you're going to get bigger too. And the things that seem intimidating today, you're not going to have to sweat them later because you'll have grown along the way and you'll be able to acquire the skills and the knowledge just one thing at a time. It's not all at once. We don't get to be Warren Buffett in a year or even 5 years. He spent a lifetime becoming that, but he was purposeful on that journey. All right, so the principle at effort here, and this is what we want to live with all the time, is the 80-20 principle. We all know Pareto's law. Vilfredo Pareto was the Italian economist who first wrote about 80% of the wealth being held by 20% of the people in Italy. Nobody made a big deal out of that. It was an economic paper, relatively obscure, until a guy named Joseph Juran, who was a quality control engineer, and I want to say he was at GE. They were studying executive compensation, and one of his colleagues remarked that it followed Pareto's law, that 80% of the compensation went to 20% of the people, that there was, equal opportunity but unequal reward based on performance. And he's a quality control engineer, and he's like, wait, that's not just something about compensation or land holding in Italy. This is like a grander principle. He saw 80% of the defects will come from 20% of the flaws. And he built it into his thinking, wrote a book called the Quality Control Manual. And there was a group around the year 2000, the Quality Control Group, that wanted to change Pareto's law to Juran's law. Because he just didn't take credit for it, but he's absolutely the guy who put it out there. I would tell you, and Gary would tell you, that just like gravity, this is a law of success. If you're pursuing something in the world of business or investing, internalizing this so that you can truly not just believe it intellectually, but act on it, is the number one thing that you can do. And we're going to apply that to all the stuff that you could be doing as an investor, right? And then the handful that you should to find your priorities. So this, to me, was like the first action item in the book. If you've got a to-do list, right? Here's all the stuff that I'm trying to do. I've got my book list to read, right? I've got the properties, all these things you're trying to do as a new investor. I remember it. It's completely overwhelming. You don't understand half of it. People are talking about depreciation and cash flow, and your mind's kind of spinning. But the reality is, right now, of all the things that you could know or could be doing, there's only a handful that you should. And so our basic practice and approach is when you look at that to-do list on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever you do to address it, identify the handful that you should be focused on and then prioritize them. Of all of those things, there's usually one that you should start with. And that is where your energy goes first, and that's the 80-20, that's how it shows up in action. The beautiful thing about getting to work with Gary Keller, right, he's now built from scratch the largest real estate firm in the world, is that he lives this. And when we came up with the idea for this book, I knew, I'm getting chill bumps thinking about it. As someone who'd been in publishing for 20 years, I was like, this is his book. This is the thing that he does better than anyone. Identify the priority and give it more time than anything else. And as an English major, working with him, I like bullet points, right? They're pretty, they're aesthetically cool. And I would hand him these lists and he'd be like, this is awesome. I think everything's here. Would you mind redoing this? And I want you to put them in priority, number them. We don't do, it's part of our style guide now. There are no bulleted lists in our office. And the reality is, if you go to a meeting and there's an agenda of 3 things, you better hope you're number 1. Because if you're in the room with Gary Keller, we're going to talk about number 1 until we're done. And we won't talk about anything else until we are. Because the assumption is if it's number 1, it is the top priority. So this leads us to the question, if you use this thinking for investing, what are the dominoes that we should be thinking of? Because we want to move with a clear sense of priority, right? We want to know this is the first thing and this is the second domino so that we can get that momentum and get that positive, right, hockey stick going in our career. So this is what I've identified for our talk today. First and foremost, I want you to identify your why, and I'll give you a framework for that. We're going to begin with the end in mind, and that's a metaphor for a different way of goal setting. I know that's trite when people say it, but there's an actual process we bring to it so that you can go to the end and work backwards. Prioritize your options, and in real estate investing, if you listen to Bigger Pockets podcast, if you read these books, there's a million recipes. There's a million recipes depending on your interest and your skills. Do you want to be a flipper? Do you want to hold real estate? Do you want to go into commercial? I mean, there's just so many variations in this game, and everybody will write about it with such authority that they'll say that their way is the only way, right? But you can now choose from them and pick the ones that best match you. I want you to adopt the investor habit, which is an awareness that carries all your decisions forward. And then finally, the number one reason I find that people won't invest is because they don't know how to save money to do it. And I'll give you a very simple way that my wife and I used, and it's how a lot of people in my world to budget without all the receipt tracking and all that stuff so that you'll have a down payment when you find that opportunity. When we were writing the first investor book, I had a seasoned investor. I think he'd been project manager on almost 1,000 flips. And he drew a box on the whiteboard. And the top of the box was open, and the bottom of the box was open. And he says, for every 100 people who go into this box, and the box was real estate investing, he goes, one will stick. And I asked him why that was. And he said, number one reason is right there. They get it intellectually, but they don't have a system, right? A way to systematically save so they can take action on what they know they should be doing. And I'll try to give you some mechanics around what that looks like. Okay, identify your why. Jordan knows this, my host. He's read some of our other books. When we wrote The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, one of the number one takeaways I got from that book was a phrase in there, because a lot of people have issues with money. And the statement that came out of this one conversation that we relayed in the book was, money is good for the good it can do. Money is just a tool. It's neither bad nor good, but it is a tool that's incredibly useful for us to achieve our goals and to make our dreams come true. And so if you're going to be working on this, there's got to be a purpose behind it. And you need to know what that is, because there's a lot of sacrifice, especially in the beginning, if you're going to achieve your goals. So here's our definition of financial wealth, and it ties that purpose into it, right? What is the unearned income to finance your life mission without having to work? So it's unearned income, passive income, so that you can do the thing that you were called and put on this earth to do without having to work. Now, does that mean you need to quit your job? No. I mean, retirement for me is probably going to be a coffin. I love what I do. But when I sat down with my wife and we set our goals, our original goals when we first, we were interviewing these people, and I'd always been thinking, I need to get raises, I need to have higher income, and then I'm interviewing these 120 people, and I'm like, they don't think this way. They're looking at the world at a different angle, and they have clear goals. When we're like, okay, we're going to do this thing. What are our goals? It was $1 million in net worth, and we wanted to make $75,000 in unearned income a year. Because, I was driving an old Toyota Tercel. It eventually had 3 cylinders that worked instead of 4, and we kept driving it. It was a nightmare to go up hills. I could not have driven it in your town. But we were willing to live small, and we're like, you know what? We don't need a lot of stuff. We're not materialistic. We like to travel, and we like to eat food. And if we had $75,000 a year and no debt, we'd probably be happy, right? I could go write books that didn't have to sell, do what I love to do, right? But what I didn't want to have happen is I just interviewed someone who literally at her past job would park in the parking lot and cry before she walked into the building. There are people out there that are working for money. And we were both very clear that we did not want to be working for money. We wanted to be working for our passion. So that's financial wealth. It's individual. For us, it was $75,000. That's what we needed. I don't know what your number is. Our numbers changed, but that's where we started. So purpose. Why? What's your big why? Why are you doing all of this? It's a really sticky subject for a lot of people. And frankly, a lot of people want to run the other direction when I talk about it, but it's really important. Most people, especially young people, don't have a clear sense of purpose. I read a stat that only 10% of the population does. So if you're feeling a little out of tune with your ultimate purpose, that's okay. Join the crowd. but there is an opportunity for you to get more in tune. In our research, I read a book, I want to say it's by Timothy Haidt, Haidt, called The Happiness Hypothesis. And he told the story in there of the rider and the elephant. And it's a metaphor for finding purpose. And so everybody here, hopefully, you've watched National Geographic or one of those nature shows, and you've seen the little kid riding an elephant through the jungle, right? 40-pound kid, 1.5-ton elephant. And the author posed this question: if the elephant chooses to go in another direction, is there anything the rider could do to stop it? From a pure physics standpoint, the answer is clearly no, right? It's just not going to happen. So the aha here is that the reality is the rider is not in charge, the elephant is, but chooses to go where the rider wants to go. And he said the thing we need to take away from this is in life, the rider is up here and the elephant is in here. And so when I read that, I was like, oh no, because I'm very, very up here most of my life. Analytical, cerebral, think with my head. I want to believe the rider is in charge, and I'm not always in tune with what's going on in here, in the heart. Why am I doing these things? And I was originally distressed. I was like, okay, I've been chasing things with the rider, and I have no clue what the elephant wants. Well, if that's what you're experiencing right now, I'll tell you there's a flip to it. If the elephant has always been in charge, then all you have to do is look backwards. There is a breadcrumb trail of where the elephant has been directing you, whether you're aware of it or not, because the elephant goes where the elephant wants to go, period. So every choice that you've made that didn't have a gun to your head was made with some influence from the elephant. And for me, I look back, I tried to write my first book when I was 12 years old. I borrowed my mom's typewriter, put it on a card table in my upstairs bedroom, had a magnolia tree outside my window. I remember those, and I tried to rip off The Hobbit, right? And so there I am, that first instinct. I wrote essays and stories in high school, and my friends would read them at the lunch table, and I would try to be funny, right? I ended up getting a writing degree with a creative dissertation. Then I got a master's degree. I worked in bookstores to pay my way through college. I ended up being an editor at HarperCollins. And that whole entire time, the elephant is leading me closer and closer and closer, but I never once articulated after that 12-year-old kid left the stage that I wanted to be that writer. It took me bumping into Gary Keller in a bathroom and saying, hey, I hear you're writing a book. Do you remember I used to work in publishing? For me to jump on the right track and become aware of it later. So I think that this is an equation for most of us. You're on the right path. The key is to become aware of it. What is the things that hold it together? If you're not aware of it, it's worth investing a little time, talking to your friends, the people who know you most. Is there a common thread? And you don't have to get it written as some mission statement, okay? You don't have to tattoo it on your back tomorrow. I would tell you, if you don't have a definition, at least get a direction. At the very least, I know that I love working with people, right? I was talking to Jordan at lunch, and the theme that I was hearing from him was community. And I observed how interesting that someone who had such formative community influences in his life as a young person is now working in HR, whose ultimate charge is to create community in the workplace. It makes total sense to me. So becoming aware of these themes in our life can help you articulate that for us. For my wife and I, at the time we wrote it, we just said we want to work for what we love to work for, and we want to have, we called it our Go to Hell Fund. If somebody told us that we were going to now be doing something at work that we absolutely hated, we wanted a Go to Heck Fund, right? We're not going to do that. And I wanted to have the freedom to be able to walk. And most people aren't free agents in life, and we wanted that, and we wanted it badly, because that would inform our marriage and our parenting. So that's a big one. You want to work on that, what is your why? So I'm going to give you some questions to help you. If you have a sense of what it is, I would ask you to ask these 3 questions around it. Why is it important to you? What will it do for your life, right? So achieving that, what does that actually do for your life? And then the third and most important one is, what happens if you don't achieve it? If there's not pain associated with that third question, you're not quite there yet. That's all I can tell you. I got really clear about mine. It's completely cheesy. It's got to do with being a husband and a father. But when I figured that out, it got very, very, very clear for me about why I needed to excel in the office in my writing, because it was connected to something that it would hurt me if I lost. The respect of my wife and be in integrity with my kids. Longer story for another class, but everybody's story is their own. It can be uniquely personal to you, but if there's not pain accomplished to it, it could be very aspirational and very cool, and undoubtedly we'd love being there, but it may not be tied to something that truly matters for you. Begin with the end in mind. Again, this is a statement that gets thrown around a lot. What does it actually mean and what does it look like? So I was chatting with Gary about this when we were writing the book, and he asked the question, why do we create plans? Why do we set goals anyway? And his assertion surprised me. He just said, look, the only reason we write down goals is to be appropriate in the moment. And I couldn't even digest that information, right? He's like, no, the only reason to have a 5-year goal is to know what you need to do this week. And here's the problem with that. Most of us cannot navigate the giant chasm between our aspirational someday goal, I want to be an author, or I want to be a millionaire investor, or whatever that is, and know how to navigate this day, this week, or this month. And here's kind of the reasoning about why. This goes back to those mental models, right? This is called hyperbolic discounting. So if you look here, if there's tons and tons of experiments on this. If I offered everybody here $100 today or $200 tomorrow, virtually everyone would wait one day for $200. Money's guaranteed, you have to wait one day. If I have the exact same circumstances and change one variable, time, give you $100 today or $200 next year, no one takes the $200. They take the $100. What is going on? Show me any investment where I can double my money on an annual basis, and you're going to be Warren Buffett fast. Makes no economic sense at all. So hyperbolic discounting is a really big word for a pretty simple idea. The farther away a goal is in the future, the less motivation it brings to today. It has very little power today to govern our actions. And so how do we bridge that gap? And so this is one of those things where we call it goal setting to the now, which is about taking an aspirational goal, your investment goal, your financial wealth goal, identifying it, right? And then working backwards so that you know how to behave every single week. So you have a someday goal. For us, ours was in 10 years, net worth millionaires and $75,000 a year in passive income. The next step would be, okay, based on that, what would we have to have accomplished in 5 years to feel like we were on track for that? Now, this is crystal ball stuff. Nobody really knows, but we had a pretty good guess. This is math. So I think we just took the goal in half. We want to be worth $500,000 and have, what is that, 37.5, in 5 years. Great. Well, based on that, what do we have to have accomplished this year? And then based on your annual goal, what do we have to do this month? Right? You see how we're working backwards? After the initial goal, we don't talk about that. We talk about each stage progressively slower. Based on our monthly goal, what do we have to do this week? And based on our week, what do we have to do today? This is essentially how Gary and now almost everyone in our organization, this is how we do all of our planning. I look at my goals and I've broken them down to an annual goal. Each month I readdress where do I have to do this month, and then each week I look at what are my jobs this week. But it's in alignment to a higher purpose. Now, beginning with the end in mind, I got to interview some amazing people, for the one thing. And I saw this pattern. And if you listen to the top people in our industry, you work for 2 of them, right? If you hear them talk, they have some vision in the future, and they're actually working backwards. And probably the best metaphor I've ever seen for this about why that works. When you go into the restaurant and they give you a little labyrinth that you're supposed to use the pencil for? Like if you have kids, you've seen this a million times, right? They give you the crayons and there's a little labyrinth. And if your kids have ever asked you to do this, I saw a guy, he cheats basically. If you go from the beginning, every decision point, you don't know which way to go. If you start in the center and work backwards, you can do it in a fraction of the time and you make no mistakes. So I think of it that way. Like in the rearview mirror from our past is just a straight line of milestones. But when we look forward, we see all the choices. So there's this trick. Go out into the future, whatever your goal is, and work backwards. And I'll tell you this, the number one analytical response to this is, that 5-year goal is just something you're throwing out there. How could I possibly know where I have to be in 5 years today? You don't. But at the end of the first year, you'll have a really stronger idea. And each year, you can update that and get better. I read once that the moon shot, right? When we went to the moon, they were only on course like 2% of the time. So most big accomplishments is all about course correction, but you have to start with this straight line to know where you're going to course correct back to something. So that's how we work it. Oops. So what are the questions I would want you on your financial journey so you're making great investment decisions to answer? And these are the big ones that we worked with and I coach people to. How much money do you need annually? Right? So what do we need to do? How long do you have? Because that hockey stick, time, is the essential element. The longer you have, the better you are. How fast will it grow? And this is asset appreciation. So if you owned a home, how fast will that grow? And then there's the yield, and that's what we would call cash flow in the real estate investing game. And so in our original equation, we were like, wow, if we had 1.5 million throwing off a modest 5%, and that is historically, by the way, kind of rent appreciation, that's extra. I mean, there's like that number shows up a lot. It's not an unachievable number. That would throw off $75,000 a year. And so that's how we looked at it. And then we had to figure that out in terms of how long we had. Well, how much do we have to set aside? How do we do that? And I created a spreadsheet to do it because I'm a nerd that way. I'm sure y'all could make a much better spreadsheet than I did. But I just calculated, what are we starting with? What is our goal? What do we think it's going to grow at? And then how much will it throw off? And how much can we add to it each year? So we just had a few columns. I'll share this with Jordan. If you want it, you can get it from him or whatever resource pool you have. It's real simplistic, but we did the math. And so on our journey, we figured we needed to buy about one residential real estate property a year for 10 years. That was ended up being our big plan. So every annual goal was every month we were saving a certain amount so we would have a down payment by the end of the year. Now, we started back, I think I told you, like 2002, 2003. And back then, it was a little different. You didn't have to pay 25% down to buy an investment property. It might be 20% or less, but it was before the bubble. But I remember our goal was we had to save $1,500 a month. With some year-end bonuses and that $1,500, we could reliably have a down payment every single year. And so each month we were asking the question, how do we set aside $1,500? And for like 3 years, I remember I did like 10,000 of freelance on the side to make that goal happen. But we just had one clear objective, $1,500 a month. Everything else was noise. If we could just focus on that, we would get where we needed to go. But we did the math to make that happen. And each year we course corrected. But that was where we started, and it kept things simple, and that allowed us to take a lot of really positive action. So you get that. Now, how are we going to do it? I've told you how I did it. How are you going to do it? One of the first big ahas we had, because we wanted to get there in 10 years. You know, we were treating ourselves like we were 40 years old or 45 and wanting to make sure we retired or whatever and could do that. We just wanted to get there fast. Well, to do that, you have to have really high rates of return on your money. Or you have to have a whole lot of money to invest. 1.5 million over 10 years, I don't know about you, it seemed like, I didn't think we could actually do it, to be honest with you. I knew intellectually the math worked, but I didn't actually think it would work for us. The reality is we hit those goals in 6.5 years. Some luck came in, we're investing in Austin, Texas. That tended to be a market that even did well during the downturn because we had no bubble before it. So we got some luck in there. It should have taken us 10 by the math. We actually got it shortened. It could take you 12, but it was a lot. And I knew that we needed rates of return between 20 and 25%. And so at the back of the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, one of the lessons that Gary learned from one of his wealth mentors is the 4 states of money. And I'm just going to walk you through these because I think it's instructive. If your money is earning less than 4%, it's dead. What is annual inflation historically, folks? 3.5? Did you just say that? I love that you knew that. Way to go. So if your money isn't earning at least 3.5% on a historical basis, it's losing its value every single year. So how much do you get in a savings account these days? What about money market?
Nothing.
Yeah, that's dead money. Is it safe? Yeah, I mean, it's like it's in a place that's secured. And up to a certain amount, the government will even insure it for you in case the bank goes bust. But that money is not doing anything for you but getting smaller every year. Right now in the bond market I was reading, people are buying bonds at negative interest rates, which is crazy to me that they would ever do that. Safe money is between 5 and 8. we're often told, right, that our stock portfolio will perform in that healthy money range, 9 to 12%. But I can tell you, when you do the math on your goals, that won't make you a wealthy person unless your goals are incredibly modest. They will take care of you and some of your basic needs, which is great, but it won't make you wealthy. Wealthy money is really above that. And I would tell you, when we sat down and did our pro formas on properties, we were looking for 20 to 25%. That's how hard we needed our money to be working on an annual basis. I think the actual number is 24%. That's what it had to do for us to hit our goals. And so either if it didn't do that, we had to throw more money at it. If it did better than that, we could either choose to invest less or accelerate the journey, and we accelerated it, right? So hopefully this is a little bit of an aha for you. If you're thinking 12% will get you there, it'll get you to a good place. But it won't get you to a lot of the aspirational places that a lot of people talk about. And here's just the math. Real estate is happening in real time. We chose to compound it monthly. But if you look at that and the 0% rates, right, that just shows you the principle, right? Over 30 years at $100 a month investing, it'd be $36,000. Everybody here could invest $100 on the side. But look at the different rates of return over 30 years. The only one that catches my eye, by the way, is the 20%. If you compound that annually instead of monthly, it's still 1.7 million. It's a giant leap, right, because of the compounding effect. We set our goals on 10, which is why we had to go above that, and we were investing more, right? We were $1,500 a month, not $100, so that we could make that journey work. But this is all basic stuff that you just need to internalize. You don't have to become a math whiz, but you have to understand just the basics so that you can make smart goal-setting decisions and know that when you acquire this property, you are actually on the path to achieving your goals. It helps you prioritize where you put your money so that you're not sticking it in a money market and moving backwards, basically. This is probably my favorite page in The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, okay? And Gary called it the path of money. It was something that was taught to him. I think it was one of the interesting things when you look at our mentors. One of the people, his first sales coach was a guy named Keith Cunningham, and he's written some great books on money. But most people don't know that he worked with Robert Kiyosaki, and he taught in the original institute, and he's Rich Dad. And he owns an amazing car wash called The Finish Line in Austin that every investor in the world would love to own because it's just a cash machine. And when that book first came out, they sold it in that car wash as a pamphlet, and a dentist, like an Amway or something, one of those multi-leveling, was waiting for his car, picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then gave it to his entire downline. And that was the big beginning. So like one of Gary's first wealth coaches was Rich Dad. Right? It matters who we get our advice from. Luckily for us, like there are so many great books. We can have any mentor we want if they've written a book, right? And go and learn from them. But I love this. This came out of a lot of that philosophy. So think of the two kinds of capital you have in your life. You can work for money, human capital, or you can have your money work for you, which is capital assets. That's the rate of return, the yield on your money. That gives you your monthly, weekly, annual cash flow. Fundamentally, you have four choices for it. You can spend it, which is what we know most people do. You're not wanting to do that, which is why you're in this room or watching this right online. You can donate it, and hopefully all of you are generous with your money, right, as well. You can hold it. That is dead money, by the way. And businesses keep reserves for reasons, right? There is a reason to have some dead money in your life because it's a cash that you can get access to really quickly. But for most of us, it's usually just a few months of whatever our burn rate is. And then you can invest it. Well, we're talking about investing here, so let's walk through the investment quadrant. You can lend money or you can own things with it. If you really want to be simplistic, and I mean simplistic in a way that we can actually do things with the knowledge versus be complicated, and it sounds cool, but we can't do anything with it. But there's two ways to lend and there's two ways to own, passive or active. So passive lending is like getting a treasury bond, right? When you buy a treasury bond, you're loaning money to the municipal or federal government. And they're guaranteeing you some rate of return because you know what they're going to do with it? They're going to go do something else with it and make more money with it. And their rate to you as a passive lender is because they think they can make more as an active lender. CDs, all of those right? They tend to be the lowest rates of return you can get on your money because they're passive and it's in the lending. You can have passive ownership, which is what most people do when they invest. Stocks, right? That is passive ownership. Now, you work at Google. How much influence do you have on its stock? I would posit, I don't know if this is true, that most of you are essentially passive investors in Google. A few of you are active because you have the ability to create the products that drive the revenue and increase the products. I own some Warren Buffett. I own some Berkshire Hathaway. I love that stock. I've always wanted to own it. It was on my goal list as an investor because I always wanted to get the annual reports from Warren Buffett, right, and read those things. I have no influence over that stock. No matter how much Coca-Cola we can buy as a household, I can't make it go up or down. I'm a passive owner of Berkshire Hathaway, okay? And the rates of return for passive ownership is less. Now you can be an active lender, owner financing. You can do private lending. We call that hard money. Has anybody here taken a hard money loan before? You're going to take whatever the prevailing rates are in the market, and they're going to add 3-4 points to that. And they're going to have the house as collateral too. So it's pretty aggressive. You're getting double whatever the passive rates would be because they're taking on more risk for it. My wife and I partnered with another couple in the beginning because getting that down payment to do these things was tough. We bought a lot in an appreciating neighborhood. It was an oversized lot that was being cut off of another parcel. We heard about it, we bought it, and we subdivided it. We didn't have the cash, so we borrowed it from another investor who was wanting to get into investing but was kind of afraid to take action. So we guaranteed him a certain rate of return. Back then, I think, because it wasn't that long ago that interest rates were around 7.5%, I think he got 12%. Ended up taking about 2 years, and at the end of this, we sold both lots. The two couples split $60,000 in profit for 2 years. Great investment for us. $30,000, $30,000. How much did the passive lender make? He made like $22,000. So passive lending can be very powerful if you have the cash available to do it. So that is a very high rate of return compared to many other ones. And then the most money you're ever going to make is in active ownership of real estate and business, period. That's where so much wealth is built in this world. I can't even think of an example of a multimillionaire or a billionaire that didn't live in that quadrant. My wife and I's aha is we were into active ownership of real estate, acquire one property. In Austin, Texas, it's hard to get a lot of cash flow. And our aha was that along the journey, if we were going to hit our cash flow goals, our passive income goals, eventually we'd have to have business ownership too. Well, by the way, the number one source of business loans is people leveraging real estate. So by the way, we didn't have to borrow it, but we already created the portfolio that we could then build a business from if we needed it, and we ended up doing that. But hopefully that makes sense. And at the end of that, you get your returns and it goes right back to the top. And the beautiful part about the passive side, the capital assets, if you keep reinvesting and reinvesting, that accelerates your compound growth as an investor. All right, so when I look at this, like this is what I want to walk my kids through, right? I'm going to have some money in passive ownership. You know, as a rule, you know, we get a 4% match in our 401k. I don't know what y'all get. I put 6% so that 10% of my income is going into that. It's tax advantage, it's fine. But the other money that we set aside is going into active lending and active ownership because we aspire to have financial wealth, which is a much bigger number and required much higher rates of return. All right, so just an illustration of how this works. This is a model we have in the book. It seems crazy dated to have a $150,000 property today, but that was the reality in the average markets that we were looking at. If you bought a property, you have a down payment, it appreciates at 6.1%, which at that time was the 30-year historical average, 6.1%. It would grow by $9,150, 6.1%. In real estate, the leverage comes from the fact that you invested $30,000. And that $30,000 to $39,000 is over 30% rate of return. You see that? So people miss the math. They see the basis appreciation of the asset, but when you look at how hard your money is working in real estate, and that's just one of the accelerators. If you add cash flow to that and depreciation, right, which saves you the tax benefits, it can actually be higher on a short term. Now that's 1 year. We modeled out in the book, we took people through 16 years of actual real estate. We went back in time so we could use real numbers, real appreciation for rents and everything, and then we worked through this model. And this is all average. So the definition of average, investing with a 30-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage over that 16-year time period before we wrote the book, was about a 17 to 19% rate of return on your money. Wealthy money, and that's just average, okay? So I'm seeing nodding heads. We've got the point, right? Real estate is I love it, it's democratic. Anybody can do this. Anybody, if we could do it in our family, anybody can do this and get into a wealth building journey that's open to anybody if they do it smart. So the investor habit, okay? You got it. What is the investor habit? And I think we wrote about this in the second chapter of the Millionaire Real Estate Investor. This guy named Michael would meet with Gary every week, and he would give him assignments like read Warren Buffett's essay or read this book. And one of the times they met, he made him fill out a mortgage application. He's like, Gary, why are you doing this? He's like, well, a mortgage application, you have to list all your assets, you have to list everything you own and everything you owe, and it's a net worth sheet. And wealthy people, they keep track of their income, but that's not the scorecard. If you're trying to be wealthy, the scorecard is a net worth. If you ever get the Forbes, right, the richest people in the world, do they even show their income on that list? No, it's just about net worth. So I'll share with you, because he's my mentor, Gary tracks his net worth on a weekly basis. He has the assets that warrant that and the leverage to make it happen. But after we learned this at the very beginning of our journey, and I think we could go back to 2005 was the first spreadsheet that we built, but we had done it a couple of times randomly. We made a commitment in our family that every month we would know our net worth. And back then in 2005, if you owned a couple of properties, you had to call and do the phone tree to find out how much your principal owed was, right? Because every month when you make a payment, there's a small payment towards principal and your net worth goes up. And then we once a year would have a realtor go and do an evaluation of our properties. So we weren't just pretending to say what they were worth. What would it sell for this year? And if you're working with that realtor, they'll usually do that for free. And we started amassing our net worth. And I'll tell you, the very first time we did our net worth, we were living in an apartment. We didn't own any real estate. And it was $4,250. And every 4 years, when they come out with the survey of consumer finances, do you know what the average net worth of a renter is? Between $4,000 and $5,000. They don't have the assets that appreciate and grow. And homeownership, I don't even think of as direct investing. It's just forced savings. The average, I think the last time they published it, the average net worth of a homeowner, even after the Great Recession, was $185,000 compared to $5,000. Right? So we started tracking it, started with 4,000, and then we started our journey. So no matter where you are, if you do that, what it does is inform every decision you make. We paid cash for a car because we knew that having debt on a depreciation, you start tracking your net worth, like, I don't want to have debt on a depreciating asset. That interest just compounds the draw. And the moment you drive a new car off the lot, what happens to the value of it? And we get this intellectually, but when you have to write it down, it makes you not want to buy a new car ever again. So the simple act, like we started becoming aware, well, how much cash do we have? And what's this worth? And is that the best place to put our money? And now over the years, we do an annual retreat every year so that we can get out and actively plan based on our goals for 5 years or whatever. What do we have to do next year? Let's get on the same page, because the number one reason couples fight is money, right? And we didn't want to be that couple. We want to be on the same page, following the same plan. So tracking your net worth, and I illustrated this with Mint. We used to have a spreadsheet. It was painful, but I do think there is benefit in manually doing it because it forced us to know all the parts. Now I just put it all in here and it tracks all of those things for us. And it always, at any moment I can track my net worth, but we still have to put it on a document that we have a shared Google Doc, we put it on there so we both can see the number. And we have a goal for this year and next year, and we have a goal to be at it 2020. So we're always tracking that number, and that number drives everything for us. That makes sense? This is the number one habit, if you choose to adopt it, that will make you financially smart. And it's easy. Add up everything you own, subtract everything you owe. What's left over is your current net worth. Not your personal worth, your net worth. But you want to know that so you can make it grow and focus on it. Super simple, requires a little bit of work, but it informs all of your financial decisions. We started paying cash for things. I can't even tell you all the things we did as a result. Making that a habit. I'm not going to dive into this. I will just tell you that when you make that a habit, in our research for the one thing, we discovered on average it takes 66 days to form a habit. So that work to do something. Now, we're doing this on a monthly basis. I'll tell you it took a few years before it was a natural thing on the first Saturday of the month for us to go, hey, let's go back in the office and do this thing. And we would forget some months, and then we would remember the next month. So over time, you'll do this. But again, remember those habits in the cycle. Other things come from this. This is some cool stuff, and it was from a guy, an accountant, and I believe in the DC area named Tom Dooley. He wrote a book called Rich Habits. Didn't love the book, but the press release shared that he had surveyed his clientele for like 10 years. And then he divided up the answers between the people who were worth over $1 million and the people who weren't. And he called them the rich and the poor. And I don't really like those labels, just to be honest with you. But what he noticed was there was a trend in the people who were wealthy. They write down their goals. They have a single purpose. They don't procrastinate. They're action-oriented, right? I love this one. They wake up 3 hours before they have to go to work. And I used to be the guy walking in with wet hair because I was that out of the shower, right? Writers like to be night owls. I learned this from my sister, right? Stay up late, watch movies. But I've become, thanks to my children, a morning person. But those hours before 8 o'clock, you can plan. You can do your financial stuff before it's all hectic. Wealthy people understand that, and I think that's why they do that. That's my hypothesis. The more I interview, the more I find. If you listen to Tim Ferriss, he's always asking, what are your morning rituals? What are your morning rituals? Wealthy people have a great day before noon for sure. They get stuff done in the morning. Most of them have a great day before 8 a.m. That's just the truth of it. They read, so they're always investing in themselves, not just their money. And then they network, and those are all really prime activities. And I don't think you have to focus on any of those individually. I actually think if you start with that first investor habit, you're going to start over time acquiring more, like a halo effect. These things will start showing up, and you'll start noticing that you're changing. All right, set aside income to invest. We're almost to the end here. This is the number one thing that most people don't do, and I think that should be number 5, by the way, not number 4. They don't do it. Our goal was $1,500 a month. In the very beginning, my wife and I, she worked for the state government, and I'm a writer, folks. I hadn't published any books then, wasn't getting the royalties then. You look up, our combined household income was less than $100,000. I want to say it was around $80,000 for a household. So it was above average nationally. We had 2 incomes, no kids, but we were hardly wealthy. And setting aside $1,500 a month, I remember we did the math for like 2 years in a row. We were living on about 70% of our income and investing the rest. And for us, it became a game. And we tell the story in the investor book. I think it was Sir Richard Templeton, the guy who started the Templeton Fund. He and his wife started to play the game of how little can we live on so we can invest the rest. And they were doing as much as 50% of their income on their journey. And that's a huge accelerant. There's time, the leverage is your interest rates, right? But if you can put more money into the higher rates, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So whatever your number is, the way to do it is create a separate account and every single month move that money over. So we started a dead money account. It was a mutual fund, right? We thought 2% would matter. And whenever we got our paychecks, we would take that $1,500 as fast as we could and move it into the other account. And we would live on whatever was in our checking account. And what's beautiful about this, if you could set it up with payroll, I want 10% of every check to go to this account instead of the other one, it's just like a 401k. How many people here invest in a 401k, right? Do you miss that money? The first paycheck, you notice it. And every paycheck thereafter, what you get after is just normal. So this is that same principle as you have your operating account, is what a business would have, but you're setting aside this other money. And we set a goal of $1,500 a month. It took a lot of freelancing and extra work to get there. But eventually, we would save up that next down payment. And as we got smarter, we learned how to partner with other people. But we took care of ours so that we could do it on our own. And we're about to get to the Q&A, but I think that if you have that net worth habit and you worked backwards from your goals and you're like, you know what, whether I'm investing in Sacramento or here in the city, whatever your aspirations are, what do I need to set aside every single paycheck so that I know that in a certain amount of time I can reliably have the money to invest in real estate. That is the number one step, that if you don't get there, you're never investing, folks. You can inherit real estate from your family, but if you're not saving, you're always going to be relying on other people. I do not believe in zero down investing. Just don't do it. The reason we put a down payment down is even when the market crashes, the worst possible outcome for you is that when you sell a property, you have to write a check to make it go away. I don't care if I make less money, but if I have to get rid of something, I would like to get money even if it's less than I wanted. That's why we have that. It's a buffer against the market. And over time, it grows and grows. So we're now to the Q&A portion of this. Thank you for your attention. Hopefully those first 5 steps, even if you're already investing, I find that most people have skipped 1 or 2 of them.
This is on YouTube.
I'll put it out.
Yeah.
Minute, I'd love to hear an aha from everybody. So, we'll start with you, Mr. John.
Aha.
What was your greatest aha listening to this?
Well, actually, I've got the pleasure of seeing this a few times over the years.
Oh, good,
So I
okay.
like it, and I've read the book, and it's great. I think it's net worth. You change your mindset.
Yep.
To, I'm not trying to chase a paycheck or a certain income. I'm trying to make that net worth.
That never
And-
grow.
Being older, it does pile up after a little bit,
Yep. Awesome.
but you gotta stick with it, set goals.
Yep, the domino effect. Awesome. All right, front row, ladies, what are your ahas? Or anybody, I guess, whoever wants to go.
I'd say I'd piggyback on the net worth, but each month,
Mhm.
looking at it. 'Cause
Yeah.
That, I'm not a numbers person whatsoever.
Yeah.
But if I knew each month, and so if you're not improving, then you're going backwards. Or even if you're staying the same.
Yeah.
You've gone backwards.
Yeah.
So I wrote down breakfast with husband each month.
Yes,
To
looking at
determine
the network.
net worth.
We'll make it a
Because
celebration.
we've never sat
Yeah.
down, we were like, oh yeah. we-
Inflation's our friend. You know, if you bought a house for $100,000
Yeah.
X number of years ago, and you look at it today, and there's some pain that goes with it. Owning rental properties is some work.
Yeah.
But it's just work. It's just something you gotta do.
Absolutely.
Knowledge.
Awesome. What else?
Setting aside money each month
Yeah,
is a great way, especially if you have a specific number, like he had 1,500 every
Yeah.
month and they, looked over a year and they knew exactly that's exactly what they needed to save to get to that goal.
Yep.
That's huge, cause then like, even if you look at it, and you're like, the numbers are right, but it just doesn't seem like it's gonna work out, it will work out because the numbers are right. Numbers don't lie, so.
yeah. Good point, like that.
I'd say mine was probably about my aha moment, kind of reiterating what I've already been trying to implement in my daily life, just how important your habits are, and positive and negative, how many people don't really focus on their habits and how they affect them in their daily life, and that's a huge part of what I try and focus on, and it was just good to see that I think people who focus on their positive habits have the positive outcomes, but a lot of people don't really focus on habits at all.
Mm-mm. Good or bad habit. Yeah, good point, yeah.
So I'm the old guy in the room here. 5 years goes by, whether you plan for it or you don't. Okay, so all these old corny sayings you hear from parents and grandparents, they're all true. 5 years from now, you will be 5 years older. What will you done with your $100 a month, your $500 a month, whatever that dollar amount is that you can invest in growing? And sounds corny old stuff, but it's true.
Sometimes I look at like spending $35 and I'm like, it's $35, it's not gonna change much, but if you were to save $35, let's say you spent it a week.
Yeah.
So run a
How much money would-
compounding thing. We're working with our grandkids on a program. Once they turn 21, we've been putting away money for them. Once they turn 21, it's their stuff. We're putting together a program where if they put in $100 a month on top of the little bit of chunk of money that we gave them, that $100 a month by 40 years, let's say they were retired at 59 or whatever, or 61, anyway, whatever, 40 years down the road, that $100 a month with a 10% increase brings over $2 million to their cash, their net worth. And that's just $100 a month plus a 10% update. So compounding interest, like they said in here, if you notice, there's people that know how compounding works and the people that pay the compounding. You want to be on the side that receives it, not the one that has to pay it.
I first learned that from Warren Buffett. He talked about compounding interest,
Yeah.
and
Ben
There's
Franklin,
something-
this isn't new. This is Ben Franklin.
Right, right. For
Look
me,
at Ben
though.
Franklin on money. I mean, he's got.
Yeah.
He only reads about Ben Franklin.
Right, I'm reading about.
We don't even talk about Ben Franklin for you guys anymore.
Yeah,
But yeah, the compounding interest is huge. I mean,
Yeah.
like Warren Buffett increased his net worth by like, it was, I don't remember the exact number, but it was a stupid amount within a couple years just from compound
just
interest.
from compound interest, because you're making interest on your interest.
Exactly.
And it keeps growing. I thought it was kind of cool. You said you could not go over the moon in 56, 58 dominoes. If they just,
Yeah, that's-
isn't that crazy to think, like how quickly that can
Mind-boggling.
expire?
I think the striving for the 20 to 25% return too.
Yes.
I was like, oh, 8 to 10, that'd be awesome because you're
Yeah.
getting more than your 0.5 in the bank, but it's like, no, think big.
Yeah,
Jared, you have an acronym for that. When you put money in, even if you break even on your rental investment, your inflation of your property goes up every month. So you can start looking at network, even if you rent something out for what you pay for it, it doesn't feel real good at that time, but long-term, it builds. What's that acronym you guys?
So I have the calculation
Yeah, I can't think of
on
the
that.
name right now, but-
You go ahead and you take the inflation at 4%, and then you also drop in as far as what's being paid off on the principal.
great.
And you look at that dollar amount, it's significant. You don't, you're building wealth, not cash flow.
Back to the net worth concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
10 properties in 10 years. So my kids are you're gonna buy 10 properties in 10 years, and then I don't care what you do, because then you're set up for the rest of your life. With and especially like when they're young, when they can go ahead and first FHA loan, year 1, now you gotta come up with 25%. Year 3, FHA loan, and then who knows, maybe kids and stuff like that, whatever they do. But they have drilled into their heads, they're buying 10 properties, 1 a year.
One property.
That's
a year.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we know that social security probably isn't gonna be around for some of, well, we know it won't be around for our children, so we have to start thinking of alternative ways to help our family and our loved ones build wealth and not live off the government, so, awesome. What other, ahas, who do we not hear from? Ladies in the front.
Yeah, beating with the end in mind
Yeah,
and really just breaking it down and working backwards. That's
Yes.
huge.
yes, he talked about like the labyrinth, and if you work from the middle outward, you get there a lot faster than if you work from the beginning, trying to get to the goal, right? Awesome. What about you?
The 5 years, just like she said, the 5 years, and I wanna know how to start that. I wanna know how to do the backwards thing.
Yeah,
I want the steps.
yeah, awesome. Good. What about anyone online? Are you there?
They're all on mute.
That's okay. All right. Okay. What about in the back?
It's not really an aha moment, but it's just a great reminder about habits. Like I've read, been doing up seminars, webinars about, I've actually got a book, just a little red and white book, but it's not just business people, it's people in general.
Yeah.
Great composers, great business people, great authors, and it talks about what their daily habits were.
Yeah.
And so it's just a reminder to me of, I need to start kind of forming those, and even though I'm not a morning guy per person,
Yeah.
so much more can be done in the morning than later at night, so.
Yeah. Good. Cool. All right. For me, my biggest aha was the whole net worth tracking. So someone told me, I don't know, like 12 years ago, 15 years ago, start tracking my net worth. And I remember the first time I did it, I remember exactly where I was sitting and I was tracking it and it was almost zero. Because I had a mortgage and I had some student loan debt and I had a car payment and I didn't have a whole lot of cash. But just that simple habit of tracking it, I do it quarterly, and buying real estate, you can just see the progression of your net worth grow. And it affects all your decisions. So if you go get a new car, like you don't want to take out a loan, especially if you have money sitting in a bank making 0.02% interest, you're like, well, why would I take out a loan when I could just, the way you look at money and how it impacts your life is really important. So cool. All right, guys. Well, we will send this video out. So if you want to watch it again, you're welcome to, or if you want to share it with your friends and family, that would be great too. It's right on YouTube. And thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah.